Okay, now I want to briefly go over the Grunfeld defense. The Grunfeld defense is a hyper-modern opening, meaning black is going to allow white to establish a pawn center, and then it's going to attack it. So the Grunfeld defense starts off when white plays d4, then black will play knight f6, and then c4. Now from this we can get other games like the Nimzo Indian, the Queen's Indian defense, etc. And now black will play g6, obviously intending to put the bishop here on g7. Then white will play knight to c3. And then we have the move d5. So how should white handle this move d5? Well, there's a couple options, and one is to take the pawn, which is called the exchange variation, and the other move is to play knight to f3, which is called the Russian line. Well, I guess I should it leads to the Russian line or the classical line, and I'll be looking at the Russian line when white plays knight f3. So first let's cover the exchange variation where white captures this pawn here. So white plays c takes d5, then black will take knight takes d5, and then white will play e4. Obviously that was white's intent, is to play e4 if white plays d4 in the opening. That way it can get a nice strong pawn center. And then black will play knight takes c3 and b takes c3. And it just looks like white has this massive pawn center. But black's plan is, like I said, is to actually attack it. So how is white going to do that? Well, it's going to start off by playing, it's going to play, or maybe I should say it's going to play the moves. Typical plans are to play bishop to g7 and c5, things like that, to attack it. And knight f6. You can see how all these moves are ganging up on the d4 square. So let's just take a look at from here, two variations. Well, I guess actually both of them start off by bishop to g7. One route is to play bishop c4 for white. Now, what are white's plans? Well, one possible plan that I'm going to show you is to play the bishop to here, the knight to here, and then eventually castle and then play f4. That's one idea. So bishop to c4, like I said, c5, knight to e2, both sides castle, knight to c6. Once again, you can see how these moves are defending or attacking the d4 square, the center. Bishop to e3, because black has 3 attackers and white only has 2 defenders on the d pawn there. Black will exchange off the pawns. Black will play bishop to g4, attacking one of the defenders, the knight. White plays f3. So that's just how one line could go. Let me back up a bit. So after, actually let me back up a little bit more. So after this move, another alternative is to play the knight to here. You know, you may be thinking, well, then black's just going to do this, but what will end up happening though is after knight f3, black will play c5, then white will play a rook to bishop 1, attacking this pawn right here, interfering with the development of this bishop here. Black will castle bishop to e2. Then after that, black has a wide range of moves that it could play. It could take the pawn, it could play the knight to c6, it could play b6, even bring the queen to a5. So that's why I stopped it right there. So let's back up and look at the Russian line. So we're going to have to go all the way back before white decided to exchange the pawn, which is the right here. So the other alternative is to play the knight to f3. Then black will play bishop to g7. Then queen to b3. Why did, what this move does is it attacks this pawn, interfering with the development of the bishop. It's also attacking this pawn and also really, defending this pawn too. It looks very strange when you first look at it, but it's not really. It does complete several objectives. Black will liquidate the pawn, so b takes c4, queen takes c4. Black will castle. White will play e4. Now white has two pawns in the center. Bishop to g4, attacking a defender of the d4 square. Bishop to e3. White adds support to the d4 square, and then the knight on f. Looks like, why is the knight going backwards? Well, the idea is that this knight will come here so that this knight can come here. So the knight will come here to attack the queen and to lend support to d5, and that way the knight on c6 can come out. So that's sort of the classical line, but actually looking at the Russian line, or one of the Russian lines. Now let me back up almost to the beginning of the Grunfeld. This is the last variation I want to go over. I'm just covering some of the popular or main variations. There's a lot of sub-variations, but I just want to give you a flavor of what goes on. So instead of so on white's third move, instead of playing the knight out to c3, white can play what's called the neo-Grunfeld and play g3, and then both sides will put their bishops on the long diagonal. Now black will play d5. White will exchange the pawn off. The knight takes. Knight f3, and the knight comes f3. They give the pawn support, because when the knight moves, then the pawn will be attacked twice. Both sides will castle. Like I said, the knight comes now to b6, attacking the pawn. But with the knight going to f3, it's defended twice. If not, if the knight didn't develop, then white would have to defend the pawn. Now white is free to make a developing move. Knight to c3, knight to c6, and e3, because the pawn was attacked 3 times and white defended again with e3. So that is just one of the lines in the neo-Grunfeld. And that does it for my brief overview of the Grunfeld defense.